Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Modern Mobility from Chaos to Control. We are so excited that you are here today. My name is Courtney Cordoba. I am the Product Marketing Manager here at vCom Solutions, and I'll be your kind of host, moderator today, and joining the discussion alongside two of our resident mobility experts who I will introduce in just 1 minute. But before we get into the good stuff, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are on a Zoom meeting today, so feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A since we seem to be having some issues with chat. Normally, chat is functioning correctly, but it looks like today Q&A is what we should go with. I am seeing your questions come through, and we want today to be interactive. Obviously, we have stuff prepared for you that we want to talk through, but if you guys have questions regarding something that is up on the screen or something just kind of in a similar vein or just whatever the point is, today is we are here to be a resource, an expert guidance for you. So we want to know if you have any thoughts or questions on the content or on your unique mobility chaotic instances that we can help resolve for you. So go ahead and drop any of your questions or comments into the Q&A, and I will be kind of watching that and moderating that as we go through the content. And again, want this to be as interactive as possible. We're also going to have time for Q&A at the end. If for whatever reason you want me to take you off mute, I swear it's a Zoom setting. It's not us. We don't auto default to muting everybody. They just kind of make us do that in the webinar presentation functionality. But if for whatever reason you want to speak up, let me know and I can allow to talk and let you chime into the conversation. Would love that too. So don't be shy. And now let's get into why we're here. And let me introduce these fabulous resources I have with me today to help me unpack all of the chaos of mobility and help add clarity and control here. I'm joined by two fantastic folks that live and breathe this every day. So we have Rob Seemann, our VP of Sales and General Manager for mobile, and he works with customers and partners every day on solving these challenges in the real world. And I also have Daniel Blackmer, our Technology Solutions Executive for mobility. He's boots on the ground, in the weeds, building practical and scalable solutions that actually work for our customers' mobile issues. So that being said, I'll go ahead and say hi, guys.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Excited to be here and talk about my favorite topic, mobility.
And I'm also excited to wax some weeds. Love it.
Yeah, very literally, he's in the weeds. All right, so really diving into those weeds today, what we're here to talk about is mobility management, obviously, but I feel like when it comes to mobile management, and Rob and Daniel agree here, oftentimes people really get stuck in like, what is the cost of the device? What is the rate plan? What do those things look like? And it's really easy to default to just thinking about phones and plans and maybe a carrier contract or two. But at the end of the day, when you dig into it, it is so much more than that. And it also really touches nearly every single department. So if you're a part of IT, finance, procurement, or ops, and your company and business is managing mobile or has mobile devices, in some way or another, you are a part of this process. So today, obviously, there is still cost of rate plans and devices to consider, but we're really going to jump outside of that and zoom out into really the holistic picture of mobility and how that can become chaotic and how we can kind of clarify things for you. But really starting with setting the groundwork of it involves so much more, which is part of why it can get so messy. And on top of that, it moves a million miles a minute, right? Unlike other technologies that maybe have longer timeframes, mobile is just back to back, day over day, things can be changing in your environment. So really, we're going to unpack that with these two guys here today.
Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, typically, as we're having strategy sessions and conversations with the advisors that we support and our clients as well, ultimately, a lot of the time the conversations can go through, and we have a good graphic here, just between invoicing to contract management to reporting to MDM to plan management. It can kind of be a little bit all over the place, and we start to address and attack what's going on with the mobile environment today, what's working, what's not working, what would you like to see differently, things like that. One of the things I'd like to highlight and talk a little bit more about would be multi-carrier management. So we're having conversations with clients, especially here lately. Multi-carrier management has come up more and more, and the difficulties behind reconciling different data sets, different environments, different data pools, different user sets, and really kind of navigating how to best manage those things. An alternative to that is kind of what is the redundant strategy that you would have as well. So if you're single carrier today, what are some things and some strategies that you would typically like to see or recommend. So what I mean by that ultimately is when you are with a carrier for X number of years, when was the last time you really analyzed and looked at the market and understood kind of what's out there and what's available, making sure that you're getting the best coverage and best rates? Those are some of the kind of things that we can help have conversations around.
Yeah, and a lot of times as I'm out, talking to our customers, talking to our prospects as well, right? One of the things that always comes up, while not unique to mobile, but I think and argue more prolific, is shadow IT. Right. And I say it's a bit more prolific, right? Because I mean, I don't know that people are, going out and sourcing like circuits on their own without your knowledge, though maybe it can happen. But what was fundamentally different, right? And we see it come up so much, right? The person that, pops into their local retail store and buys a tablet or activates a smartwatch, puts it on their corporate card, and there becomes this charge, right? Or love the stories when we get into it and we start looking through expense reports, right, with customers, and we see people, expensing their whole family plan, right, on their T&E and their expense. It's just so prolific in mobile. And there's also the intimacy and need of mobile, right, as well. When it goes down, when it's not working, when that person's in the field, they can't get the support they need, but I can go to a retail store and get my problem fixed or get a new connection right now. It just happens over and over again and magnifies the concerns about all of these other items that we see.
Yeah, and that ties in really well, I think, Rob, with business continuity, which we have kind of tagged there towards the bottom left. And all of these kind of
Sure.
tie into that overarching, thought process. But, really kind of asking some challenging questions with the clients that we support in, how are all of these different components tied into a business continuity strategy? A lot of the clients we end up speaking with have maybe one or two really key people that are involved with and are touching the mobile environment consistently. We like to joke about the lottery clause, right? What happens if Bob or Jim or Sue win the lottery? What's left for the business? How does the business continue? How are the end users supported? What happens next? So tying that into really defining policies and procedures and contract management and contacts at the carriers and understanding the shadow IT that Rob mentioned, understanding points of contact from carrier strategy and how the business is structured is really important and key in navigating kind of the complexity and chaos of mobility.
I see business continuity is always so interesting, right, Daniel? Because in mobile, it's somewhat not scalable by design with the retail carriers, right? And what I mean by that is for security reasons, of course, there's only named people with a PIN code that can actually call in and make a change on the account. And on one hand, you need that, but on the other hand, how are you scaling? How are you supporting and enabling your IT team to be able to do all of these things that then create a security concern for them? So it's a real paradigm, right, that organizations find themselves in.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
arguably fascinating too, because you could argue that it's even more important to have that transparency with mobile in such a quickly moving
Sure.
environment as well. So that's
Yeah.
a little bit of a paradox.
Yeah, and right, and that really is kind of just touching on the costs that we're thinking about, which is the rate plan and things of how you open this up for us, Courtney. But a lot of times in this chaos, we lose sight of all of these other expenses that everything in that messy slide will for, right, is really costing us. Some examples up here. I think the hourly rates, as we look at different regions, sure, we can kind of negotiate what those loaded costs look like. But here's the important part. All of these things have to happen to manage your mobile landscape, and they all have a cost, right? And when we're really just thinking at or looking at the cost of what my rate plan is, right, and we're being pushed from our leadership team to reduce our IT costs over and over again. It's really easy to ignore all of these, but these are such big drivers that we really work with our customers as we're consulting with them and kind of talking to our partners about, hey, but how are you doing this? Where are you looking at this cost, and how are you viewing that in terms of IT? And it can be a lot of those big light bulb moments for them and for our customers when we see that. And really, when these aren't being managed, what we typically see is you're losing those opportunities to streamline and save money.
Absolutely. So kind of diving into you guys work day in and day out with many of our customers. Really, what are the things that you hear from them that they are struggling with the most that's really relevant that come up?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorites. These are actual quotes that we've heard over the years from prospects, clients, advisors, and as we've had conversations specific to mobility, and some common themes, some common threads would be, lack of visibility is huge, especially when we're talking multi-carrier environment. Lots of manual processes. Sometimes we have conversations around, oh, I've got a great spreadsheet, or we have this internal system and it works okay, and we update it 80% of the time, right? And that may work, but really there's some opportunity for some improvements there, right? Alternatively is lack of time. I mean, we're all getting busier and busier and busier in our day to day, and we're seeing that obviously in the IT space as well. Resources are extremely limited, and the reach of IT support is vast. So when it comes to mobility specifically, a lack of time is huge. So how are you managing your time effectively specific to mobile? And how are you kind of looking through and analyzing approaches and processes behind that in order to support the needs of the business? One of the examples I'd like to kind of talk through here is we had a large healthcare organization that came to us and said, we've got a project where we need to upgrade essentially 1,000 units, 1,000 tablets. And we've got some home care advisors out in the field. So, we have to figure out logistically how to navigate ordering the devices themselves, doing some staging and kitting. We have to figure out how we're going to ship stage kit and figure out how we're going to get these into the hands of the end user without disrupting business and without disrupting any patient care. We also have to figure out how we're going to report against these and how we're going to allocate these charges. And so, these are the types of conversations that our team can help kind of strategize around when you're talking with clients, or, if you have a need, we're happy to help have those and address those conversations.
Yeah, and I think there's a theme there too, Daniel, right? Is first kind of reassuring people that like you're not alone, right? In this and in this being difficult. There's Gartner and Forrester studies, out there across IT teams, asking them about, how they're spending their time and what they're doing. And it's interesting. We see results back that 70% of their time in IT is keeping the lights on activities, with mobile being kind of one of those pillars. I'm not adding any value, right, to the organization, and I'm spending all of this time doing it. And on top of that, according to numerous surveys, you can go out and you can look some of those and some others. Mobile's considered a high touch support category, high touch support category, and there's a lot that goes into that. Courtney, you set us up in the beginning of that, right? It's the volume of devices that are out there that are mobile, right? It's the velocity of change, right? A new operating system's coming out every couple of months on these that's auto installing that I can't prevent. What's that chaos going to look like that we have? And then just that variety, right? There's different form factors. There's all of these different things that are very difficult. And that's the perfect storm for all of these headaches that we hear from these customers.
And I think it's also important to call out. So a lot of these tie in together. So the last one there, we've had the same model for the past 20 years. Why switch it up now? Typically also is followed up by, I don't know who that phone belongs to. That person hasn't worked here in 10 years, which also equates to, I don't know why our mobile is so expensive. So
or what about when they're just all in the administrator's name? Like every
you
single
got 400
phone, right?
John Smiths here. What's going on?
Yeah.
This doesn't look
On
right.
my spreadsheet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's funny, right? Each of these, I smile as I look at this as Courtney was putting this together, because each of these, right, I remember the story, right, of where this was and where this came from, and who owns these assets and where are they going. It continues to tie into that complexity. It goes back to the shadow IT, right, that we talked about. Well, you don't know whose phone it is because they went to a store and bought it. Right? So how would you know who went and did that?
Yeah. Feel free to drop in the chat too, or the Q&A. AJ did say he tried to get the chat up and running, but if it isn't, apologies. But you can drop into the Q&A if any of these are familiar for you or in your environment. I know we have a few different types of constituents on the call today, whether you are in IT supporting mobile for your business, or whether you're a partner advisor supporting your clients with mobile. If any of these are kind of familiar or kind of particularly hit on a pain point for you, go ahead and let us know. And something that I also find interesting, and obviously I am not the mobile expert here, I'm kind of more the vCom product expert, but something that you hear about a lot and has kind of been a trend for years now, but I feel like still is relevant, is kind of the limited illusion. It seems like carriers have put forth this option that sounds like a godsend, right? It sounds like it solves a lot of these problems. You don't have to worry about overages. You don't have to manage things so much. But that can feel like somewhat of a trap, right? Or something that you guys have seen is that doesn't necessarily always fit for all. It's not a one size fit all solution. So talk us through what you guys see with customers and clients and supporting that.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two prongs to this, right, Courtney? And the first one really being how you opened us up, right? That mobile's more than the cost of the rate plan. A big part of it, undoubtedly, right? So, what we hear a lot is, well, we'll fix the rate plan, and then that's going to fix all of these other problems for you, right? But how does the offering of an unlimited plan fix my shadow IT? How has that given me business continuity? How has this reduced the time that I've done these expenses? It doesn't, right? It becomes painted a little bit in a picture in that you don't have to spend your time managing usage and worrying about how all of these things are pulling together, which admittedly, and by the way, is very complicated and complicated by design, a little bit on the parts of the carriers and is time consuming. Um, and you don't have to worry about it. And oh, by the way, your allocation back to your cost centers, if you're managing your spend that way, that's all going to be so easy because it's this one flat cost. And there's a little bit of truth in there, but I think it comes down to the second prong of that, which is unlimited can be great, but it isn't necessarily one size fits all or one carrier, right, fits all. So if we think about an environment, right, and we talk to these customers all the time, right? Hey, I was approached by so and so for unlimited. It's this great price. It includes this hardware, whatever it might be. We'll say, great, that's awesome. Let's pull out some bills and let's see how your usage is trending. Right. And then after it takes them all the time to go back to get all of those bills, we sit down, we sit and we look through and we're like, you're averaging kind of 1 gig per phone, right? That you have out there per month, which is great. And then it's adding cost to this. So I don't understand how that's fixing it. This isn't a problem, right? It's being framed as a solution to a problem that you're not fundamentally having. And I think that gets missed. The other thing is, unlimited can give us a tendency to think that then we go all in on one certain provider. And that may not also be the best case for you. So we talked about that example where, oh my gosh, what if everybody's using 1 gig and unlimited is just going to be crazy expensive for me and not needed? Well, the inverse of that can be true. We can say, oh my gosh, everybody's using 50 gigs a month, right? Make up a ridiculous number. Unlimited does make sense. But what if you're like most organizations, right? For 85% of those organizations that are somewhere in the middle, right? That say, I have this subset of users for valid business reasons, they're high usage. Great, we're going to put them there. But everybody else, they're pretty standard on their usage, right? So maybe they should be on a plan that pools versus kind of that unlimited. And then we've got another wrinkle in there, which is what if carrier A doesn't solve my coverage across this big country that we live in, which is many case the times. So we start to see that the best fit many, many times may be that we're going to have a couple of different carriers, and we're going to have some that are unlimited and some that are kind of pooling on there, and that is really the way that we optimize our costs. The problem can be without the proper toolkit. That's super hard for organizations to manage, right? If they're trying to do this on a spreadsheet, so them being able to get there becomes very, very hard. I know, Daniel, you and I had a mutual customer that I just explained exactly, right? We came in, they were on pooling plans, kind of all on one carrier, and their usage for very valid business reasons. This is a field services organization. They had users that were using 16, 17 gigs per device, right? And we started by saying, do you care about that? And they're like, no, these are valid business uses. I just want to manage the spend. And that's exactly what we did. Right. And I think we're somewhere near, 25, 30% savings on where they were at before by going multi-carrier, by segmenting unlimited to pooling. And that also usually isn't kind of that full story we're getting when unlimited's being pitched as that savior.
We actually have
And
a
I think,
great question. Sorry to interrupt. Just want to throw this out there. We have Keith Strong asking, with many stakeholders responsible for managing mobile, where would you start this conversation? And do you have any like examples or perspectives he was asking for as well? Shouting out to you, Dan, for specifically.
yeah, that's a really good question, and I think you can start, as all the way down to, even someone who's supporting mobility via help desk, all the way up to, to C level, to the executive team. One of the kind of mantras that I like to live by is, you can really dig as deep as you want to when it comes to mobility. And as you start peeling back the onion, a lot of things start happening, and a lot of those conversations tie into other parts of the business. So, our best recommendation is to start, really as high as you can. But I think there's value in having conversations all along the way and finding out, who is interacting with mobility, how they're interacting with mobility, and how, from an advisor perspective, how you could potentially help them, either streamline or find some more efficiencies. And then tying that back into to Rob's point here with the unlimited illusion is, there's also quite a large spread when it comes to unlimited pricing. So, we've seen examples 40, 50, dollar spread just to have an unlimited plan. Well, do the needs of the business support, having a fully, international options with 100 gigs of hotspot and all these extra add-ons? Is that necessary for a field technician? It may not be. So there's some optimization conversations that can happen around those types of discussions as well.
I also
A great
want to
Yeah,
question.
and
oh,
go ahead. Go on, Courtney.
okay. I was just gonna say, I mean, kind of talking about moving away from unlimited, going through where you're more managed, which means you have your eyes on it, you're paying attention to your users, who are your high users, how are we gonna pull them differently than some of the other ones? I mean, that is the benefit of having people like Rob and Daniel supporting you with all of those pieces of moving pieces and movements across your plans and across your usage, and evaluating that appropriately as well. And then kind of tying back into Keith's question, having those discussions all the way starting at the top down, right? And being able to help you kind of sell, like, we can do it a better way. And look, this one customer, I think Rob, you mentioned, or Daniel mentioned, almost 20 to 30% savings. That's significant, right? By being able to kind of switch this over and have the support from people like you on their team, on their side of the table as well. So wanted to kind of shout you guys out in that sense too.
Yeah, and I think, just building on that quickly as well, I think it's high level, kind of as high as we can go in the organization and the front line, both at the same time, because both of those have a really interesting story that they need to tell us. It's kind of, as we're going up, right? What is our strategy? Where should we be? How is this aligning to the vision of the organization that we have? And then as we're going to the front line, it's what's actually happening, right? A thing about unlimited that can go overlooked so many times as well is, because you would then have a model that would say, I can cost effectively enable this person to use the 40 gigs of data that they're using per month. Real example, right? We see that time and time again. Just because I can manage it effectively, we need to go up and we need to talk about, why is someone using 40 gigs of data? And just because I can manage it effectively, does that mean that they should be? Maybe there's a valid reason. I gave an example where we were in the 20 gigs and the organization had valid reasons for that. But there also couldn't be. This is risk, right? This is risk. We have corporate data on that device. What applications are they accessing that could be causing some concerns here? Is there a safety implication? At that point, you're streaming all day. I mean, Daniel, what else are you doing with that kind of usage? You're
Absolutely.
playing
Yeah.
YouTube. What are
Yep.
you supposed to be
A
doing?
lot of
Are you
Netflix.
supposed to
Yep.
be watching safety? Like, that is often overlooked as well. It's just because we could manage it. Is it the right thing for the organization? We have to understand that.
Yeah, and we can help navigate those conversations as well, just around how the data is
100%.
being consumed. We've got some great access into some really insightful tools that we're happy to discuss, as well as a follow-up to today's call, if anyone would like to have further discussion.
Courtney, have we
Absolutely.
talked? Are we going to change the name of this webinar to Unlimited?
I know, right? And we actually have some more people dropping some stuff in the chat. So love you guys are engaged on this right now. So Angie's asking, how do you guys quote unquote fight back when you get the we don't need that, everyone uses their own phone and it's not a problem, or the we don't supply business phone lines or phones, we trust our employees? What would you come back with in those scenarios?
Yeah, we hear that quite a
Um,
bit. I can I'll take on part of that question that Rob can add into, but I think we hear that quite a bit, Angie. So thanks for bringing that up. From our side, I think BYOD is a very interesting strategy, and I think that depending on the organization's culture and policies, a lot of the times those types of conversations get tied into security and true cost. As we've referenced and highlighted today, there's a lot more that kind of comes into managing that. So how are those devices being secured? What are they accessing that would be important to the organization or enterprise to really understand kind of the data set being used versus just generally giving them kind of full access and paying a stipend. We can help with an ROI or, potentially depending on the scenario to really kind of show them what it would look like in a managed environment versus the BYOD. A lot of the times we see that because organizations get really tired and frustrated of having to deal with all the nuances that we've referenced today. And so we can help navigate those conversations as well.
Yeah, I mean, here's a hot take I used to charge ridiculous amounts of money for in consulting when BYOD was really popping, right, back in 2016, 2017. And you start with what their goal is. Why are you going BYOD? And let's understand that, right? Which is, I think, Daniel, what you were framing up so well. 9 times out of 10, the answer is it's cheaper. It's cheaper if I go BYOD, right? And then the next question, oh, are you giving a stipend? I'm not going to say 9 out of 10. I'm going to say 10 out of 10 is, yeah, we're going to give them a stipend. Great. What's that stipend? Oh, $30, $40, $50, right? Whatever it is that might be. You haven't reduced your costs. If you want to reduce your cost, get out of the hardware game. If you take hardware out of this and we boil it down and we have a standard usage with the customer, right? Where they're a gig, they're 2 gigs on there. You're so much cheaper than the $30 stipend that you're paying these people. It's unbelievable. And you're getting out of the complexity a little bit of that hardware.
Love that. And we also have Keith dropping in the chat. He's strategizing actively on the call. He said, I like the idea of starting the conversation around business continuity and the different aspects of managing mobility, i.e. charts and stuff. So yeah, absolutely. I think Daniel was mentioned in the beginning. Business continuity really ties into every single piece of this because it means having your eyes on it. And your environment is covered if someone does win the lottery or are out sick at a crucial time, things like that. So absolutely. Thanks, Keith. All right. Well, let's kind of shift the conversation a little bit. We talked about unlimited, I think, enough. But what's kind of a better way? This is the wheel of lifecycle management here for mobile. And although this is obviously like a vCom branded looking slide here, it's also something that we very passionately believe this covers it all. This covers all the bases, and Rob and Daniel can expand on that. But really, when it comes to mobile, what are some of the ways that we should be approaching this and utilizing, kind of looking at all aspects we have laid out here?
So this is absolutely my favorite slide. And the reason I love this is because it applies to every single person on this call. Regardless of where you sit in an organization or how you support a client, or if you are a client and you support your end users through a mobile environment, every single mobile device has to go through each one of these phases at some point. And so if you're struggling with where do I start, or how do I kick off a conversation, or how do I bring this up internally, you can use this and easily map out each phase of the mobile lifecycle and then do a deeper dive. And we're happy to help be a part of those conversations and really work through and start asking, how are we doing this today? Why are we doing this today? What was the purpose of the way that we did this originally? And it really starts bringing up some very interesting insights around, how environments are being managed. This is where we spend a lot of our time, and we're talking strategy with our clients and with our partners, because at the end of the day, really taking a step back and looking through each one of these phases is key. Without doing that, it's going to be very difficult to really manage an environment and build a policy that supports managing that environment. And then ultimately through the support side, supporting the end user and understanding kind of what the needs are and how that all ties in together. And so we've touched on a lot of topics today. And one of the things I wanted to call out here too is mobile devices are pretty emotional, right? And I say that because it's something that we have on us all the time. It's something that an end user is, experiencing an issue out in the field in front of a client, that could be detrimental to a business. If your CEO is about to go on vacation and boarding a plane, this email goes down, his mobile device isn't working, the connectivity drops, that's a problem, right? And so, having those conversations around what happens next, understanding the business continuity is really key. And it's come up so much more, in the last decade or so. And I think it's really important to kind of highlight those pieces. But ultimately, I think this all ties into addressing at a higher level the people the process and the platform and how that's supported in your mobile environment, and answering and starting with those three questions. So Keith, kind of to your earlier question that you posed in the chat, where do you start, or who do you start having conversations with? Who are the people that are involved with the mobility? What are the processes that support the mobility environments? And then, are they using a platform today? That's all key. If they're not, that is a key component of tying in all these phases. And we're happy to help have those conversations as well.
Absolutely. And that being said, getting a tiny bit more tactical here, and Daniel, thanks for setting us up perfectly here. We've kind of organized the roadmap to clarity. What are some of the things that you can walk away with today, knowing how to ask the right questions, or, where to align on strategy, what to do when it comes to, mobile policies, things like that. So wanted to kind of leave you guys with some of these pieces of information. Rob, if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, I know, and not necessarily the order that we see them on there, but I think we've touched on some of these, but a couple maybe we'll add a little bit more color to. Um, One being kind of, we didn't get a lot into mobile policy, and that being the foundation. And that's a bit the concrete form of kind of when I was talking about going higher in the organization and saying what's acceptable and where should we be versus kind of the front line of what we're doing. That policy, we need to have alignment across the organization on that mobile policy. And that sets the stage for a lot of the things that cause chaos in the organization, right? Policy being acceptable use. We're not streaming. We're not running up that data. Phones are supplied by the company. You can't go into a retail store and get one. You can't expense it, right? Those are all things, any acceptable use policy, the same we do when we get a laptop. We need to have that for our mobile to set those expectations and be something that we can go back to when employees or teams are getting sideways. I feel very passionately about that one. It solves a lot of these problems. I think the other one as well, where we can kind of get stuck a little, or customers can get sideways a little bit, right? Is we talked about making sure, and Daniel, you talked about making sure that people are using a platform, right? That they're using a tool that we have in there. And this is where I think mobile gets even a little bit more complex. And I would argue to say we have a tool that's purpose built for mobile, right? There's a lot of great asset tracking out there. It's integrated in your ITSM and all of these different things, right? But a phone is fundamentally different than a lamp or a paperclip, both in how I order it and how I track and manage that inventory, because of all of the variables that go into what we consider to be that asset, right? And you know this, Daniel, right? We have a SIM card that I can pull out and put into something else, right? That's a part of it.
Yep.
Then I have the hardware that we've bought, the phone, right, of it and in and of itself. And then I have who is using it. We can have shared devices. That can be a team of people. That can be a specific person. A lot of these in those tools break down, and you have to manage all of those attributes to effectively manage mobile. So not all tools are created equal, I think would be my point there, and understanding if the tools we're using are meeting our need. And then, I think another one I always feel very strongly about, Courtney, is the first one that we have on there, which isn't necessarily just mobile, but I think a reminder for us always: ask how and why questions, and ask them constantly as we're kind of talking to our users and consumers of the service, our frontline employees that are servicing it. How and why? What are we seeing, and how are we making sure that we're getting in front of those trends where people are running into issues or having support issues?
And I think to add on too, from the platform perspective, Rob, and I think you nailed it with what you just mentioned. But I think that a key component or a big miss a lot of the time that's specific that we see for mobility is a lack of synchronization across teams, a lack of collaboration. So HR is obviously doing the hiring and firing, but no one's giving any sort of insights into IT, right? You may get an email, who knows? How is that then reported back into the carrier portal? Is that device being cut off? Is it being suspended, or is it being repurposed? Without that integration into a platform, it's the Wild West essentially, right? You have to be able to tie those things in together and automate as much of that as possible as businesses evolve and scale. And we're still we're in 2025. We still see so many manual processes being done when it comes into mobility that it's shocking. So if your organization is struggling with that, or if you have clients that are struggling with that, we're happy to help kind of initiate those conversations and walk through what it would take to get that done. We do these types of integrations all the time.
Well, and there's just so many cool problems, right? That can solve, right? Like, I love, one of our customers that we have, right, where international became such a problem for them, right? And getting the international features added and all the complexity, right? That happens, right? And so they integrate, they integrated this with their travel tool, which was really awesome. So that anytime we saw that there was an international travel flight being booked, we could go out and get notifications to make sure that the right rate plan is attached. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we can really push forward and can really transform, I think, mobile environments for employees and drive down those costs. I mean, Daniel, what's an international charge, right? If you didn't have the
It
feature,
can be scary.
thousands and
Well,
thousands.
Rob, it's
Yeah, you
funny you
can
should
take
ask it.
5 hours to do a dispute, but
Yeah.
then you've
Well,
lost
and
5 hours,
it also depends on your SOC code and your feature set and what unlimited plan you have. You have to determine that first.
Yeah, right. Totally. Totally.
Love it. And Rob, I know you had kind of touched on corporate mobile policy. If, let's say, someone on the call potentially today is like, where do I start with that? Or how do I reevaluate the ones we have today, make sure they're actually working for me? Is there kind of like a process you like to think about when creating those for businesses?
Yeah, I would say a couple of key points or key takeaways, right, that we have to have is first off, let's look across all of our policies that we have across the organization and see where mobile's being touched, because a lot of times it's addressed in a lot of different areas, right? It can appear in acceptable use, right? It can kind of appear all these things. So let's take an audit of what we have that's out there that's in the written policy. Next, let's look at the technology that we have and what are we able to enable with technology so that we don't have to have a written policy, right, that's supporting it. A great one can be things like we have hourly employees and you can only, they're given a phone, but you can only use those phones during business hours because we've got overtime laws and that varies by states and do all of these different things. So one thing we can do, right, is a lot of MDM tools out there. Well, we can enable the device to not work outside of business hours for them. Well, then I don't need a written policy. Then I don't need these things, right? The device itself doesn't work. I don't need to take up real estate on a written policy that we struggle to get people to read. So there's all kinds of different things I think that technology can do that's creative for us. And then the last part of that is like, let's take our inventory, let's see what our technology can do, let's update or refresh or write if it's new that policy that we have. And then before we roll that out, we have to have cross-organization alignment. Every business unit, right, that we have there, every functional group within the organization needs to review that, approve it, and understand it, and then roll it out. All right. Or otherwise, we get into the areas of, well, that policy doesn't really apply to us. We're special. We're sales. We're, we're marketing. We're whatever it is. And I think, those are really heavy hits there. But, Courtney, that could easily be its own webinar.
Awesome. Great tips. And we also have a follow-up question as well, again from Keith here. Does vCom have a lot of experience working with clients in state government?
Yeah, I can take that, Keith. I mean, absolutely. From a lifecycle management perspective, government contracts can be extremely difficult to navigate, especially those that have been around for quite some time. They don't necessarily get updated a ton, but having some sort of a platform to store those contracts, to understand kind of the buying model, the purchase model, having a way to catalog those devices and make sure you're purchasing off the correct rate plans and getting the right discounts for hardware and things like that. Absolutely. We do these all the time. And so we're happy to help have conversations around those if you've got anything specific you want to chat through. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that puts us about at time today. But of course, if you have any last minute questions, go ahead and drop them into that Q&A. We can spend an extra couple minutes here. But also that leads perfectly into how we wanted to kind of wrap this up, which is if you have any, if you have a need and you want to have a discussion with Rob or with Daniel or someone on the vCom team to kind of take you through a strategy session, we are here for you. And I'm going to be dropping into the chat a link that you can use to just put your information in and it will let us know that you want to be in touch. So go ahead and click on that link if you want to get in touch, as well as if you want to see vManager. As Rob and Daniel mentioned, we do have a platform that is purpose built to support the mobile environment and all of the different aspects that we talked about with mobile today. So if you thought to yourself, this is great in theory, but I want to see it in action, go ahead and again, click on the link in the chat and we will get in touch with you. We can book a strategy session or do a vManager demo walkthrough as well. I'm not seeing any last minute questions here, but again, thank you so much for your time today and for your engagement. We super appreciate you joining and all of the questions as we go. And Keith, yes, I would like a strategy session. Awesome, Keith. I put that link in the chat, so go ahead and click on that. It'll bring you just to a quick form fill page. Only thing required is your name and email, and we will reach out to you and get in touch to book that strategy session.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
you, everyone.
all. Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Daniel. Great information and details.
Thank
And
you.
we'll talk to you all soon.